listening to Radio Maria, a Christian voice in your home. We're now continuing with Find Something More, Find Your Way Home with Kendra and Christine.
Thank you, Vicky. It is so great to be back. I missed you last week, Christine.
Same here. It's what's a week without Kendra, everyone?
That's how I feel, exactly. So it's great to be back. And what a topic we have today. I think there is every person that is walking the faith journey in this day, this age, this uncertainty, the evil, the darkness that you see floating around the world, like manifesting itself physically, is so desperate for their loved ones to be found, for God to come into their life, and for them to find that peace and that love and that salvation, because I know I live it every day. I know that you have some friends and family as well that you're praying back. So we're going to talk about what can you do to save the souls of the ones you love. I'm looking forward to this one.
So the good news, folks, is that there are 3 things that Jesus, through Saint Faustina, says are absolutely necessary to save souls. And what I've discovered is that for whatever reason, they're not commonly known, even though in St. Faustina's diary, she lays them out. They're there for us to see. So I'm going to go over the 3 things that Jesus says are absolutely necessary to help him save a soul. And Kendra, feel free to interrupt. Feel free to tell stories that are better than mine. Jump in there.
Okay, so can I just admit something? You just mentioned St. Faustina's diary.
Yes.
Which I have had in my book stack.
And not read.
For probably 4 years. I was like, ooh, I got to read this. I mean, it's not thin. It's thick, for those of you who can't see my fingers in the radio. It's a chunky one. And it is a book that you should be meditating on, like read a page, read a couple passages, But I'm going to admit, I have not read the whole thing. I haven't read a vast majority of it. So for any of you out there who are like, oh, I should be reading that St. Faustina's diary, just know that I'm there with you. And I will learn these 3 things. I think I probably already know them, but yeah, I will also, as always, interject because that's what I do. So enlighten us all on the St. Faustina gems, because I think I'm looking forward to it. Maybe I don't know.
Well, you might not be looking forward to the first one because nobody really does. So I'm going to get it out of the way first. Okay, people, you ready? You ready?
Fasting.
It's in there. Sacrifice. Sacrifice and offering up suffering is one of the 3 things that's absolutely necessary to help save a soul. Now, when we want to evangelize someone, we don't necessarily think that way, do we? We just don't go there. We think, tell me if I'm wrong, I got to worry about this. I've got to be burdened by this. I will be, and I am kind of unhappy about this. And some of us want to argue with the person or get into it sometimes. There's the conflict avoiders who would never bring anything up, but there are also those who try and get worried that it just ends up in an argument. And so before I go into sacrifice and suffering, our favorite subject, anyone out there, raise your hand. We can't see you, but have you ever failed miserably in your evangelization attempt? And as you're speaking, hello. And you feel like the person's looking at you like you're nuts, as though you have green antennae that are growing outside off of your scalp, waving in the wind, and the person is not connecting with you whatsoever. I mean, I remember talking about the Holy Spirit with a family member of mine, and he looked at me and he says, I have no idea what you're talking about. Is this like a ghost that goes in the wind? It was just not working. And so with enough of these under our belt, we can kind of halt when it comes to being called to say something. We can think, I'm just going to mess it up, so I'm not going to say anything. No, people, there's a great commission upon all of us. The end of Mark, go to all nations and baptize and make disciples. The making disciples is a commission that Jesus has put on all of us. It's not, evangelization is not optional. It's not optional. Pope Paul VI said it's the number one mission of the church. And we don't want to come to the end of our lives facing Jesus empty-handed when he said, did you bring me any souls? And we say, I clammed up because I feel like it would cause too much strife. That's really not the answer that we want to bring. And God does not call us to be successful. He calls us to be faithful. He only calls us to try. So, instead of arguing, we really have to dig deep into our souls, try to find a virtue or two, and bring out humor, bring out kindness, bring out patience, bring out peace. Because the minute we go, you're wrong, I'm right, no, I'm right, no, you're wrong, we allow the other person's pride and defenses to come up even more, say, well, just because of you, I'm not joining that church. And we can give the enemy more strength. And case in point, I remember being a teenager and my mother said, look, I do not want you drinking. And so I went out and I immediately drank 2 wine coolers.
Wine coolers.
That was a big
Bartles
deal.
And James.
Yes. So it was by virtue of the harsh, argumentative way that she said no that I immediately felt defiant. Not that it's her fault, but it irked that spirit or impressed that spirit in me that sent me to the liquor store. So we don't want to do that. So, senses of humor and finding what we do have in common is so important. Because if we can't find anything we have in common, and if the person doesn't know that we care about them, then they could care less what we believe. So there's a lot of tilling the soil that goes on, being kind, listening, saying the truth with love, but not being argumentative. And case in point, I was at a Marian conference in Arizona, and this couple was at a table, and they were cracking up. And they were cracking up and cracking up. And so I'd had it. I went over there. I said, you have to tell me what you're laughing about. And she could barely get it out. She was laughing so hard. And she said, this last weekend, my family came over. They're half atheist, diehard. They're half uber Catholic, very Catholic. And they got into it like they always do. They always get into an argument. This time it was over where we came from. Darwinism versus creationism. Evolution versus being made in the image of God, Adam and Eve, da-da-da. So they were going back and forth, back and forth. She said, halt, I have a story to tell you. She said, there was a boy who went up to his mother and said, Mom, where do we come from? And she said, oh, no. And thought to herself, this is the birds and the bees talk that I've never wanted to give. I guess you're old enough. Yeah, okay, here we go. There's a man, meets a woman, they come together. And he goes, yuck, I know about that. Ew, gross, Mom, don't tell me that story. And he said, no, I mean, like, did somebody make us? Did somebody create us? And he said, well, yes, God created us. But before he did that, he created the earth and the sea and the land and the creatures. Then he created man and woman, and that's how we came to be. And he said, well, that's not what Dad said. And she said, well, son, what did your father say? And he said, Dad says we come from apes. And she said, oh, that's just your father's side of the family.
That's a good one.
That's a good one. So she was just thinking about how she did that, and just, it broke the ice. It just brought silliness into these warring factions in her very own family. And sometimes we're called to bring in something that pulls us out of an argument and brings us together, even over something silly, even over something just a trifle, because that kicks out the spirit that is going to entrench people in their positions. And so I want to go deeply into what else is needed. And when it comes to suffering and sacrifice, Jesus said to St. Faustina, there is but one price at which souls are bought, and that is suffering united to my suffering on the cross. Pure love understands these words. Carnal love will never understand them. So to drive this point home, Jesus actually showed St. Faustina hell, because we really don't necessarily have the desire to offer up our suffering or to take on a burden or a suffering if there isn't a passion behind it. She passionately didn't want anyone to go to hell. And the Fatima children were the same way. She showed them hell. They were very young, and Jacinta and Francisco, their brother and sister, and she said, are you praying? Are you praying? Jacinta, so many souls go to hell. Why doesn't Mary show everyone hell? If the sinners saw hell, they would stop. So this little girl had such a pain and such a fire in her heart that no one would ever go there, because she saw it and she saw souls in it, that she would want to do things to offer up her suffering. And so it's very important not at all that we dwell on hell. That's a mistake. The devil would have us do that. It's not at all that we would fear it. The devil actually fears us. He's scared of us. But to discount it and say that it doesn't exist and no one goes there leaves us, what are we fighting for? If everyone just automatically goes to heaven, there's no such thing as a spiritual battle. There's no reason to fast or pray. It washes the faith away.
Well, and that's what the devil wants us to believe. That's his number one thing, is for us to think that he's not going to be able to pull us into hell, right?
Right, and he also
that he exists.
There you go. So this is what she said. St. Faustina says in her diary, number 741. Let the sinner know that he will be tortured throughout all eternity in those senses which he made use of to sin. I am writing this at the command of God, so that no soul may find an excuse by saying there is no hell, or that nobody has ever been there, or can say what it is like. How terribly souls suffer there. Consequently, I pray even more fervently for the conversion of sinners. I incessantly plead God's mercy upon them. And Faustina also wrote that most of the souls there are those who disbelieved that there is a hell.
I want to interject, because I think that looking at a picture, I know we've all seen some sort of Satan picture or some painting or something that made us physically ill, maybe even a little bit scared. And I'll be honest with you, I saw one today in a video that I was watching, and it was like, and it was just stuck there as the person started, babbling on. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that is the scariest picture that I've seen in a long time of Satan. I mean, it was scary. So as you sat here, we're not supposed to be dwelling on it, but you know what? If the little kids saw hell and St. Faustina saw hell, I'm going to remember that picture and think and remind myself to offer up my sacrifices and align them to Jesus on the cross, because I forget. We can't waste the sacrifices that come up in our lives and the trials that we've just got to take on, because it's worth something. I mean, it could even be something like doing the dishes or not making dinner because you don't want to, but
wearing a mask.
Right. Signing up for mass, or, like anything. Seeing that relative you're not real fond of. Okay, I'm going to be loving to this person. I'm going to offer up and align it to Jesus on the cross. And I just, a lot of times, not sometimes, I'll be honest, a lot of times I forget and I waste it. I just waste it. So that picture, honestly, it was so evil. And I just think that's just one picture. I can't even imagine what real hell is like. I can't imagine what they saw. Wow.
Right? It borders unimaginable. And Jesus also said to St. Faustina, my daughter, I want to instruct you on how you are to rescue souls through sacrifice and prayer. You will save more souls through prayer and suffering than will a missionary through his teachings and sermons alone. So what is the point of our whole existence, people? It's to reach heaven and to bring others with us. That's what it's about, to save souls. And how did Jesus do that? Was it primarily through his preaching? Was it primarily through his healing? Or was it through the cross? How did he save us? And we're called to emulate Jesus. So when he was teaching St. Faustina about this, at first she was repulsed, as all of us, I assume, are in our humanity. I never wake up and say, I really hope today's a migraine day. I really hope when it's a migraine day that my kid doesn't stop screaming. So we don't, in our humanity, we don't ask for these things unless we're a saint among saints. And she was repulsed by it, but she got so good at it that she actually looked forward to the chance to sacrifice for sinners. And so she does a novena for a lost soul that someone asks her to pray for. And then she starts wearing chains to Mass. And her spiritual director gets really upset about her. He's like, take the chains off. You're of ill health. It's not good. And he said, instead of the chains, I want you to meditate on Jesus being baptized. And that really upset her because she loved to meditate on Jesus being baptized and there was no suffering involved. So she didn't feel as efficacious. Now, is she sick? Like, is there something wrong with her? Is she masochistic? What on earth? Why would anyone go get those? Well, this is a lesson for y'all. I expect everyone who's listening to this show to wear chains, a mask and chains. That's really the crux of this. But
and maybe be dragged behind the car on your way.
Please try that. And
no, it's because she's so high. She's getting closer and closer to God. Yes, she's climbing up those levels. She's climbing
up the levels, and she knows. She doesn't just think. She doesn't just hope. She knows that souls are being rescued from eternal damnation. Eternal. She knows that she's plucking them out of the devil's hands, and that is giving her joy, and that is giving her a drive. And so one Lent, St. Faustina offered up so many sacrifices and sufferings for souls that Jesus in a vision handed her a ciborium filled with 1,000 hosts and told her, these are the hosts which have been received by the souls for whom you have obtained the grace of true conversion during this Lent.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So the thing is, that's for all of us.
Yep.
That's for all of us. We are going to see, he's going to present the souls to us that we helped save. And one of the ways that heaven has been asking us a long time, especially the Blessed Virgin Mary, to offer up some kind of sacrifices through fasting. And fasting, believe it or not, is something that Jesus is expecting of us. And I'll put it in the comments below this YouTube video that we're recording right now. But I give a whole talk on fasting that goes into great detail about where it is found in the Bible, how efficacious it is, what it means. But I'll just give a little tidbit from that. And that is to say that, believe it or not, Jesus is assuming that his disciples are fasting. And there are three very much ignored words in Scripture. The Gospel of Matthew, chapter 6, verses 16. He says, when you fast, do not fast like the hypocrites do. He doesn't say, if by some chance you might consider the possibility of fasting, that's only if you really feel like it on a Thursday.
And also whine about it. Like, oh, I didn't eat all day today, because that's not, washing your face and taking care of yourself and being joyful, because we're supposed to be no one should know that we're fasting, right? So to the point of when you fast, for sure,
unless we have to tell them, that's why I can't eat this thing that you're putting in front of me, then it's awkward if you don't.
Yes.
But in that case, you're not doing it to boast at all. You're doing it to explain. And so with my case, I was having such a hard time. I knew that I was called to do it, and I'd fast throughout the day, and then by the end, I was fasting on mint chip ice cream. It was just not successful. And Jesus, in Scripture, it's always a food fast, folks, right? Because there's something about man does not live on bread alone. Neither does a woman, by the way. We don't live on bread alone. And so when we fast, we're actually delivered. Now, why are we delivered? We're delivered from things that otherwise won't come out through just prayer. We deliver the world from things that otherwise won't come out. With prayer and fasting, we can ward off wars, suspend natural laws. I'm going to give you a story of how something came out of a woman who was fasting for herself. Now we all have. Now, this is when we have power. Why can't I convert my son? Why can't I convert my friends? Why is my family stuck? Why? We get stuck in part sometimes because we're not fasting for that soul. We're not fasting for that conversion. And St. John Vianney, the patron saint of priests, he fasted all the time. And if you know anything about him, he almost single-handedly converted an entire town. Instead of going to the bars, they were coming to church. And we know, can you imagine how hard that would be? I mean, he had staff help, but this man, he was fasting and praying all the time for these people. And a parish priest came up to me and said, I'm praying, I'm preaching, nobody's changing. And St. John Vianney said to him, you've preached, you've prayed, but have you taken up the discipline of fasting? And he said, if not, you have no right to complain. So what we tend to do is complain and worry and argue rather than fast. We just do that. I know that we do. I know that I'm not the only one who does that.
Yeah.
The real efficacious thing to do is to take a bread and water fast on Wednesday, a bread and water fast on Friday. And if you can't do it, and I couldn't do it. It was 11 years ago now. I was doing bread and water and Excedrin Plus because I realized, hey, I have some kind of gluten thing going on. This is terrible. I was getting a massive headache. So on New Year's Eve, I was in a church pew and I said, Lord, I can't do the bread and water fast. How do you want me to fast? And I sensed him say to my soul, give up what you love most. I went, oh. And I knew what that was. It was desserts and coffee. And I said, for how long? And I sensed the word indefinitely. So it was such a delicate moment because I knew that he meant I could not ever again, not for one day, have a cup of coffee again till I die or a dessert. I knew that's what he meant, but he didn't say never again. He said indefinitely. It's kind of like a word that he knew would...
Isn't that like the same thing?
I guess. I feel like he was softening the punch. The boxing glove had a lot of padding on it. And I was so depressed the next day. I was such a pity party pooper. Mm-hmm. But I haven't done it. I mean, I've cheated. I've had gummy bear vitamins. There's been occasional moments, but I haven't had.
That's not dessert.
Oh, come on. I think it is.
You can't qualify that as, I mean,
just because it has vitamins?
Dessert, you're having like a big piece of cake or a big bowl of ice cream or a pie or something. Like a gummy bear, vitamins, really? Come on. That's weak. What, you have no sweets at all? None at all?
I have, I'll have caffeine. I'll have a tea that has, that comes with some sugar in it, the bottled stuff, or I'll have a lemonade. But no, bad person, bad.
Right, you're going straight to hell, girl.
That's such a bummer to hear that. No, but I don't have the cake. I don't have the cookie. I don't have the fudge. I love dark chocolate. I don't have the, oh my gosh. When I'm in heaven, Kendra, I'm just going to dive into this big pool of Dove bars because that was my thing. The dark chocolate with the vanilla ice cream. I'm going to eat 17 of those the minute I get through the pearly gates. Jesus is going to hand me a Dove bar.
Can I just interject and say, okay, world, listen though. So she does this. and her son, her teenage son, who she's thought she's lost.
Majorly
And I
lost.
remember a couple years ago, you were like, please pray for my son, who is so on fire, has his own little podcast out there for teens. This is the fruit that when you sit there and you're like, okay, is that Dove chocolate bar? I'm sorry, I got God bumps all over right now. I mean, if that Dove chocolate bar is that important versus your son's soul, I just look and I think, what a blessing that you were able to be here to see it. And you actually had some fruit in your life come out of probably your sacrifice, or in
and my husband was fasting
combination
too.
with it.
My husband was fasting too. And before we take the break, there's 2 sons who have benefited from our fasting in ways that were very obvious. My 16-year-old's on fire, thinking about becoming a priest. He was a pothead. I mean, if that's not casting out one of those sticky demons, I don't know what is.
Yep.
And my husband was fasting, and I give him a lot of credit. And my other son, when we adopted him 11 years ago, we had been through the foster adoption process for 3.5 years, and we were never chosen as parents. And we thought, do we give up on this? What should we do? And my husband said, we haven't gotten a clear word from God. Let's just keep moving in the process and see what happens. So I said, okay. Shortly after that, we get a phone call. You want a baby? I said, I think so. And I said, can I call John? And she said, I just called him. He said to call you. I said,
That's
I think
awesome.
so. I said, how much time do we have to decide? And she said, 10 minutes. So I called him up. I said, do you want a baby? He said, I think so. He said, how much time do we have? I said, 10 minutes. He said, ask for 15. So this is a beautiful story. So we lived in Alameda, California at the time. And he went outside, and there's just cement and trees, no flowers, no people. He gets his coffee. Coffee smells like coffee. And he's walking back, and he's not smelling coffee. He's not smelling cement, whatever that smells like. He's smelling this really strong perfume, flowery smell. And he thinks, gosh, maybe some teenager just slathered it on. And then he realized, oh, this smell is roses.
Oh,
and
I want that. I've never had that. Oh. Mary, give me roses. Say Therese, give me roses.
And so, okay, she's had a lot of experiences, so she's being a glutton right now. So he knew from our trip, we've been to Medjugorje more than once, and there's been roses there, the smell where there's no roses or rose perfume present. So she makes herself known in this beautiful way. And that's a funny story. We should tell this. Somebody's asked for a show on Medjugorje. We could give it. But so a friend of mine on one of the trips, this puppy pooped right next to her. You know what a fresh one smells like.
Especially a puppy.
Instead of smelling it, she smelled roses.
Unbelievable.
While one of the visionaries was giving a talk. So it was just great. So he's walking along. He smells roses, and he realizes, oh, Mary, it's you. And then the smell stays with him as he's walking. And then he senses his soul say yes. And he doesn't know why. And then the smell disappeared. So it was that morning, later on that day, that we get the call from the social worker. He works in the Oakland Diocese at the time, and underneath the Oakland Cathedral is this beautiful mausoleum with this crucifix, and he runs down, and he's about to put his knee in a kneeling position in front of the crucifix when he remembers, and he's going to ask the question, should I adopt this baby or not? And he remembers that he already gave his answer.
Oh.
So we felt like everything was meant to be. We got this cute little bumblebee baby in a crib that we had to buy within 10 minutes, and everybody's happy. And my older son, who was 5, is throwing dangerous objects in the crib to show his joy. and so we're just having fun. I kid you not, a couple weeks go by, and the social worker calls and says, I'm so sorry, but the birth mother has chosen another agency. The baby will be taken away from you on Friday, and there's nothing you can do.
No way.
Nothing you can do. devastated. My husband can't go to work. He crawls under the covers, and I see him put them over his head. He can't even function. I feel like a cannonball has just passed through my gut. I start calling friends saying, what can I do? What can I do? And I remember, wait a minute. I can pray and I can fast. I'm not totally helpless here. So I took a rosary and I threw it at my husband. His hands come out from the covers and he grabs it and he pulls it back in. And for 2.5 days straight, we're praying, we're fasting, praying, fasting, praying, fasting. To make a long story short, on the very day they were supposed to come and take the baby away from us, the birth mother, who wasn't supposed to meet us at all or even get our information, it's amazing how that happened. It was defied God, defied science. Let's put it that way. So the birth mother and her mother, on the day the baby was supposed to be taken away from our home, are sitting in our living room happy to choose us as parents.
Oh, praise God. What a beautiful story. Wow.
So we'll tell you the next 2 things that are necessary to save a soul when we come right back. This is Find Something More, Find Your Way Home with Kendra and Christine.
That was awesome.
Thank you for listening to Radio Maria, a Christian voice in your home. We're now returning to Find Something More, Find Your Way Home with Kendra and Christine.
Thanks, Vicki. Okay, we are talking about sacrifices and fasting. And I just want to say, we were talking about St. Therese, who is the little flower. It's all in the little things that we do. So don't panic if you're like, oh my gosh, how am I supposed to go all day with bread and water? You can offer up all little sacrifices throughout the day. It's a matter of where your heart is behind the sacrifices. And so, Christine, that being said, and I know we have 2 other things to cover, so we got to go quick. What things can people do if they're like, I can't do the bread and water fast?
Yeah, and if by the way, if I'm not going to be able to get to everything about this talk, and it's on a CD, if you go to queenofpeacemedia.com and you click on the CDs or click on shop, you'll find it. It's called How to Save the Souls You Love. So I go into more detail about all of this, and that's one of people's favorite CDs. You know, a CD looks like this.
It's a flashy disc for those on the radio.
Yeah, there you go. So the thing is, I'd like to stress the food issue because a lot of people give up. They say, well, I can't do the bread and water fast either, so I'm not going to do a food fast. I'm just going to not be angry. The problem with that is that if we don't pull the spirit out of ourselves or allow God to do it through the grace that fasting opens us up to, we won't necessarily have the grace not to be angry. It's the fasting when it comes to food that helps us not binge watch television, that helps us not rage. So it actually transforms us. And so sometimes we can think, you know what, I just sit and I watch that, I eat that whole bag of chips. Or I do not munch on a carrot, I grab the cookie. So unless the only way you wouldn't do a food fast, like giving up something that's junky for you, it's good for you anyway, would be if you do a really healthy diet and it's already a real big struggle because you have a health condition and you have to really, there's a lot of self-mortification involved in that diet already, that is your fast. Mm-hmm. But if you're just gorging on stuff that's really unhealthy for you, yeah, you can't do the bread and water fast, but you know that Jesus is going to say, hey, that's actually not so good for you. Give up the soda. But I love soda, and then you'll go through that. So, yeah, I do recommend that if there's something around food you can do, that's going to be good because then it gives you more grace to do the thing that you think you should do in terms of your personality or forgiveness or whatever it is that's stuck in you. Right. Very briefly, a woman, she had bulimia several years. She prayed and fasted for 3 days. She could never stop the binging and the throwing up, the binging. It just was beyond her power, one of those sticky demons. And on the third day of praying and fasting, she felt this force come up and out of her. She was delivered, and she never binged or threw up again. From fasting, it's counterintuitive. Why would someone with an eating disorder fast? Doesn't seem sensible. So there's a spiritual power to it. And that's why Jesus says when you fast. He's assuming that we're doing it. So make it a weekly or a twice a week practice. Pray, say, Jesus, how would you like me to? Because these are the times we can sometimes only save a soul. He says these sacrifices, suffering, offers, it's requirement. It's a requirement. The second one is acts of mercy. So we have our Jesus behind us here. And Jesus appeared with this image to St. Faustina. And it says, Jesus, I trust in you on the bottom. And he said regarding this image, there must also be deeds of mercy, which are to arise out of love for me. You are to show mercy to your neighbors always and everywhere. You must not shrink from this or try to absolve yourself from it. So, merciful works, we know what they are. Visiting the elderly, prisoners, smiling at people when you're having a bad day, being kind when you don't want to be, praying for an enemy. There's so many ways that we can be merciful and kind and being forgiving. With my son, when he was being a pain before his conversion, I would think, oh my gosh, I want to strangle him. How rude. I can't believe he said that. And I'd think, acts of mercy. And I'd go and I'd make him a sandwich. And not being a pansy, but make him a sandwich. And that's not how I show love. I don't even know how to make a sandwich. I'd chop the carrots. I'd get the glass.
If you're putting carrots on a sandwich, then you don't know how to make a sandwich.
Oh, you're not supposed to do that? No, okay. I did put them on the side. So I go up. I'm like, honey, do you want something to eat? And I knew that he would feel loved if I did that. So he would say, oh, thanks, Mom. And I think, what a pest. And I walk away, But I would consciously say, I am not connecting with my son. Like there's something wrong with him. But I would try to do acts of mercy to bridge that. So we can't absolve ourselves from it. And there are so many times that we might be inspired by the Lord to do an act of mercy, to give a lot of money away, to do an act of charity and reach out and step outside of ourselves, and we don't want to. And it's hard. And St. Faustina went out into the streets. Her sisters would bring prostitutes back to the convent and women who were down and out. That's partly what she did. So we can't absolve ourselves from it. Jesus is not going to absolve us from acts of mercy. And when we do it and we know he's asking us to do it and we don't wash it away, whisk it away, flick it off of ourselves, and we do it in spite of our feelings about it, we gain even more merit. He's more grateful. He floods us with more grace because he knows how hard it was to do that thing he was asking of us. So we've got a third thing besides merciful works, and that is the obvious, which is prayer. And the thing I want to emphasize is I think it's obvious that we need to pray. I hope it is. One day without prayer and your day will go differently. So have you noticed that if a day doesn't have prayer in it, it's just not going to go the same way internally or externally in our lives? He's asking us to pray a certain way, and he wants us to pray with incredible trust. And I think as we see things fall apart in our lives, in the world, in the church, trust is going to be a harder muscle to exercise and yet a more necessary muscle. And he said to St. Faustina, your great trust in me forces me to continuously grant you graces. You have great and incomprehensible rights over my heart, for you are a daughter of complete trust.
Right. That is so hard too. But
yes.
The more you pray, the more you surrender every day. This is why it's a daily thing. To your point of one day without prayer, I know it. 2 days without prayer, those around me know it. And 3 days without prayer, the whole world knows it. Like, it's so important every single day. And not just like at a specific time and then you're done praying. It's offering and seeing God and giving him praise and thanks and offering up those little sacrifices, turning away from that Oreo, I don't know. It's the more you do it, the more you do find that trust gets easier because you see him, you feel the graces, you feel the Holy Spirit come to you. And all of a sudden it's easy to go make that sandwich with the cut carrots on the side, and you're just like, oh my gosh, Lord, thank you. Because right now I would normally want to like scream at him, like, what's wrong with you or whatever. I mean, I don't know if I know that's not your style, but maybe he's irking you so much that you're just wanting to just scream and be like, I don't know why you're so angry. You know how teenagers can be. But I don't know. I just have to say that the trust, that's so amazing. And it's so hard. And I know so many moms and dads, but I hear it mostly from moms who are right now saying, all I do is worry about my kids and maybe my spouse who's not there. And this is where I almost want to say, I was just talking to someone yesterday where I was like, where's your trust that God's going to bring them to him? You have done so much. She prays all of these incredible deliverance prayers. She knows she's been attacked by evil so many times. But I think, that's one of the hardest things, to let go and let God. I remember hearing that phrase the first time. I was like, what does that mean? Let go and let God. Well, you got to trust that he's going to bring your family. If you do all these things, right? I don't know. It'll just bring you to do those sacrifices and sufferings more, I think.
I have a great story that dovetails in what you're saying. To give an example of mistrust versus trust, a friend of mine, Patricia Sandoval, and she's got this amazing story that's in the book Transfigured. Patricia Sandoval's escape from drugs, homelessness, and the back doors of Planned Parenthood. This is an incredible book. Father Don Calloway said, this book is better than mine. And he said, are you ready to read one of the most powerful conversion stories ever written? I couldn't put this story down. So Transfigured, if you're interested. This will give you hope for your children. So Patricia's mom is beside herself because Patricia, after leaving the home, or kind of being kicked out of the home, 3 abortions, working at Planned Parenthood, on the streets, a homeless methamphetamine addict. The mom gets closer to her faith during this time where her daughter's out on the streets. She doesn't even know where she is. Can you imagine the pain? So she goes up to a statue of Mary and she says, "Oh, Holy Mother, help my daughter, heal her." And she actually hears Mary speak, and Our Lady spoke to her and said, "You are not praying correctly." And she was surprised and responded, "Oh, Holy Mother, teach me then how to pray correctly." And she said, "Surrender your daughter to my son." And the mother responded, "I already did." And Our Lady said, "No, you haven't. When you start glorifying my son by sleeping, eating, and doing away with your sadness, then you will have truly surrendered your daughter to my son." And after hearing those words from the Blessed Mother, she began to trust him, praise him with joy. She was no longer sleeping fitfully. She got her appetite back. She wasn't constantly sad and terribly worried. And now Patricia is a pro-life, beautiful speaker who's traveled the world with her testimony, and she's on fire. But Mary is sad and Jesus is sad when we tie their hands. And here's what happens with our lack of trust. This is a metaphor for it. So let's say God is a mom in the kitchen and we are a little girl who wants what we want, and we're worried, and we're like, "Mom, are you going to make a meal for us? Are you going to make a meal? I really like this. I really like that. Are you going to do it right?" And the mom knows how to make the meal. The mom needs to be left alone, free, with her hands free and her time free and her energy free to make the beautiful meal for the daughter. But the daughter is worried and anxious And she says, Mom, can I make it with you? I know how to do it. So she takes some flour and she pours it on the floor. And then she trips her mom up. She pulls on the apron. She pulls off the apron. And then the mother burns herself. And the mother patiently smiles and says, I got it, honey. It's okay. I've heard what you want. I heard that you want the meal a certain way. I'm going to make it. I do know what I'm doing. And so the kid just can't calm down about it. She can't realize that the mom's got it. She's like, Mommy, but you didn't add raisins, and she dumps a lot. She goes, honey, you don't even like raisins, and it doesn't work out that way in the end, the way you think it's going to, and so forth and so on. So the mother, she makes the meal. It's a little more burnt than she would have liked. It's took 3 times as long, and she's a little beat up, but she doesn't love her daughter any less. She scoops up her arms and she gives her what she can, because the daughter didn't untie the hands of the mother and leave her freedom to act. It's in that freedom that we give God with complete trust that frees him to do the miraculous. And so can you imagine Jesus saying to you, my daughter, I can't help but give you graces because you are a daughter of complete trust. You wrestle the graces out of me. I can't hold them back from you because you just let them flow. There's a direct cause and effect relationship between our trust and God's ability to help us. He can help us any way he wants, but he wants it done in a relationship. And so I'd like to, if I could, I've got Jesus behind me here, to guide everyone in a prayer to close. We've got just a little bit of time. Is that okay?
Of course.
All right.
Yes, please.
So take a deep breath, and if you're watching this on YouTube, look at the picture of Divine Mercy behind me. Jesus said to St. Faustina, by means of this image, I shall grant many graces to souls. So for a moment, in the silence of your heart, present to Jesus any people in your life that you would like him to take care of, that you're worried about. One by one, surrender them into his capable hands. Name the people that you think, I really want them to receive grace. I really want you to help them, Lord. Could be someone from your past. Could be someone from your present. Could be someone that you can't stop worrying about. Surrender all of them into his capable hands. And now surrender to Jesus any problems in your life that may seem insurmountable, that really burden your heart. One by one, ask him to take care of them. And as you do that with each problem, say the words to him, Jesus, I trust in you. You take care of it. And then present another issue and say, Jesus, I trust in you. You take care of it. One by one. Do you see evil growing instead of weakening? Do not worry. Close your eyes. Say, Jesus, I trust in you. You take care of it. And he will intervene and accomplish miracles where they are needed. You see a sick person getting worse, or your loved one moving further away from God and the church. Do not be upset, but close your eyes and say, Jesus, I trust in you. You take care of it. And there is no medicine more powerful than God's loving intervention. Pray like that. God performs miracles in proportion to our trust and our not thinking of ourselves. This has been Kendra and Christine on Radio Maria. And may you find something more and find your way home. God bless you.